Welcome to a new video, part of the series where we're building an e-commerce website with Django and React. If you'd like to follow along, just head to the GitHub repository. The link is in the description of this video, and once you're here, you can just clone or download the repository to get started. Hey everyone, so before getting into this, we just wanted to give you a heads up that our website, justdjango.com, has gotten a serious upgrade. And so if you're interested in becoming a better Django developer, then head over there. The link is in the description below, and otherwise, enjoy this one. So in this one, we're going to be adding some more information to our product items. Right now, we just have a product list view and we get a description and a category and a title of the product, but we want to add some variations to the products. So that's going to be, for example, with the shirt, it's going to be the size, so small, medium, and large, and it could be the colors, so different colors of the shirt. So those are different variations of the product item that we want to add as extra information on our item model. And then we're going to work on a detail view to show the user those different variations. So let's head back in here and we're going to open up the source, go into containers, and we can go and duplicate the product list. So let's just zoom in here. So I'm just going to duplicate the product list and I'm going to call it the product detail. Okay, then I'm just going to close that. And we can bring this product detail, which I'm just going to relabel here. So we can call the class product detail and down there. And then we can go into our roots and we can import it. So I'll just import it there and call it product detail and import from containers product detail. Then here in our roots, we can create another one and we can say this goes to product ID with the colon here, which means that this is now a parameter that we can access in our roots, and then we'll use the product detail as the component to render out this root. So if I go to products/2, for example, now the reason we're getting two components is because we're having two roots being rendered out. So this root and this root are both being matched. So that means we just need to come here and say exact, so that when we come back now, we only get one of those components being rendered, and we're going to change the product detail view so that instead of fetching the product list, which is what it is doing now, then we will make it fetch the product detail and pass in the ID, which is coming here in our URL. So first we can just go and cut all of this out, and we can just add another method here and say handle fetch item, and this is just going to be a function that we will call in the component didMount method. So we'll call it like this. Then instead of the product list URL, this is going to be the product detail URL. So let's actually go into core, into the API, and then we can go to our views. And here we already have an item list view. So I'm going to copy that and then just create the item detail view. So we can just change this. And instead of it being the list API view, it's going to be a retrieve API view. Then we can use the same information here, allow any item serializer and the same query set, and then take this view into the URLs, which we can just import over here. Then I'll actually change this from product list to products, and then just duplicate that again, and I'll add a primary key to the end of this one so that we use the product detail view to handle that. So that means we need to just pass in a primary key in the URL that we query. And then we can go into the constants. And here we can change product list URL to go to /products. We can create product detail URL to go to products and enter an ID. So we'll make this a function. So it takes in an ID and it returns this endpoint. And I'll just put a slash at the end there. So this product detail URL is what we want to bring into the product detail. So I can come over here and replace product list URL with product detail URL. Then we just need to make sure that because this is a function that we pass in the ID, which is coming from our URL here. And we can do that using the with router. If we just wrap the entire component with the with router component that we'll import from the React router DOM package, then that'll give us access to the match properties, which we can basically use to get that parameter. So let's just come here and we can say import from React router DOM, and this is going to be with router. Then we can take this and wrap it around all of this. Okay. So that means that we can come here and we can actually go inside the render method, and I'll say console.log this.props. And if we come in here, so we're getting a 4F4, but that's fine. We'll fix that later. So we just come into the console, and you can see we get an object as our properties. And there you can see we have match as one of the properties that we have. And if we look at that, we have params, which is another property which has product ID. And that is the parameter that we specified here in the roots, this product ID. So that value is 2, and that's what we want to extract from match.params. So we can just come back here and we can go into the handle fetch item. So here we can say constant equals this.props, and this is going to be match. And then we can access the params from that. So here we can access params.product ID. So if we come back here, and the reason why this is failing is because we have a product ID only with the ID of 1, not with 2. So if we go to products 1, okay, now we're getting a new error. So if we actually just go to the network and then go to /1, then you can see that that data is being pulled in. So there's the actual detail view. And this issue is coming from data.map, which is in the product detail. And that's just because we haven't configured all of this rendering for the detail view yet. So I'm going to get rid of that console log there, and the rest of this can stay the same. Then if we just come down here, we have item group, and now data, which is where we're getting the error, that's no longer a list or an array. That's now an object. So instead, we can actually just say constant item equals data. And then I can get rid of the mapping and the return, and then come down here and get rid of all of that as well. So we only have one item now. So if we go to products 1, now this works. And so we basically want to do it that if we click on the title of the list item, then it will navigate us to the detail view of that item. So what we can do is we can just go into product list, and then we can come all the way down here to the item title. And I'm just going to say onClick equals to an anonymous function. And then here we can say this .props.history.push. And we're going to push to /products/ and this we can output dynamically. And this is going to be item.id. Okay. So if we come back here and we click on that, then it navigates us there. Cool. Even though we're still rendering the same thing, we can go and change this now. And what I'm going to do is actually split the screen in half so that we have a card on the left, and on the right we can have the variations of the item, which we'll add in a second. But let's just go to the semantic UI React page. And here I'm going to search for a card, and we're just going to use something like this. So we can actually do it a little bit simpler. If we look at this one, this example, the syntax is quite short, so it's just the card that we need to import. We can just bring that here to the top. And then we can come all the way down, and I'm going to paste that here. So the image is going to be the item.image. The header is going to be the item title. The meta can be the item category. The description will be the item description. And then the extra, we can make all of this that was the item extra. So what I'm going to do is just replace the item extra with a react.fragment, and then replace all of this as well. So just like that. And all of that in the React fragment, I'm just going to cut out. We can delete the item group, and I'm going to replace it inside there. Cool. So if we come back to this, this is what this looks like now. And I'm going to use a grid to separate the page in half. So if we look for the grid component, it's quite simple like this. And you can use a divided layout. So I'm just going to copy all of that. We can come here to the top and import the grid component. And then inside the container right here above the card, I'll just create this, and I'm just going to get rid of those grid columns there, and we can get rid of this row there as well. So columns is going to be 2. We can keep it divided, and then I'm going to, at the end of this card, come over here, close this for now, but then inside the row, we're going to create a grid column, and we're going to wrap that around the card. Then we're going to create another grid column, and inside here is going to be the variations. So if we take a look at this now, cool. Then we can come and actually make this card fluid so that it takes up the entire width of that side. Cool. Then we can also take this label. So I'm actually going to cut out that part there, and I'm going to bring it here into the title, or rather the category. So I'm just going to create some space here. I'll say this is a React fragment as well. Just paste all of that there. And then the item category, I'll just bring it above like that. Okay. Cool. So that you can play around with, but I'm not too fussed about where this label goes for now. The button here, I'm just going to say this is fluid. Cool. So it takes up the entire width, and then instead of primary, we can say this is a color of yellow. Okay. So then the variations is going to show over here on this side. And the way that we're going to handle the variations is with 2 new models. So let's go and jump into the models here inside core. And if we just scroll up here to the item, so the variation is going to work as an extension of the item model. Basically, we're going to have 2 models. We'll just create it here. The first one is going to be a variation. And this is just kind of an in-between model for the next model, which is the item variation. Basically, the idea is that on a variation, you can specify the name of the variation. So this will just make models.character field and say maximum length is 50. And the idea here is that you can give it a name such as size, or you can give it color. That's what the variation is going to be. And then inside this variation will be the item variation, which will link to that variation. And this is where you're going to pass all of the options for that specific variation. So if this was a size variation, then the item variation would have a value. So we could say this is also a character field, and it'll be 50. Then here you can put size is small, medium, and large. That's just as one example. So the variation needs to link to the item, because every variation is going to be unique to the kind of item it is. Because if you have maybe a toaster as an item that you're selling, you probably won't have a size of toaster that you're selling. You could, but maybe size is more suited as an example for clothing, but not so much as a toaster. You might have brands of toasters that you want to sell, but the whole point is that a variation is unique to the item. So here we'll pass a foreign key to that item and say it's going to be just item, and on delete is models.cascade. Then we can just go and copy this string method here. And this is going to be self.name that we return. Cool, then the same thing for the item variation. The item variations are linked to the kind of variation that we're dealing with. So basically, if we're dealing with size, then we have certain values that are linked to that variation. If we're dealing with color, then we're dealing with different item variations. So this is also going to be linked to the variation, and that's going to be a foreign key as well to the variation model. And on delete is going to be models.cascade. Then we can copy that and return self.value. Now, just as one other thing, we could add an attachment to the item variation. So this is where you could add something like a file field, and that could be, or an image field. So if we just add image field here, then this is where, if we just come back here, the different variations would show. So we would loop through the variation. So we, for example, would have size. So we'd have size as variation, and then all of the item variations of that variation. So we'd have small, medium, and large, and the attachment for those different item variations. So that would be, if it was color, then we would have a red shirt, a blue shirt, and a green shirt showing up as the different variations of that color. So that's what the attachment field is going to help us with. Then we can actually just add a little bit more constraining here to the model. So we can say class meta, and we can say unique together. And this is a tuple of tuples. So we're going to specify that the variation and the value are unique together. This is just so that we don't have more than one shirt variation that is for color. And then we can do the exact same thing here for the variation model, where we'll specify the item and the name as unique together. So like this, we can then go and make migrations. So just run that. Then we can go and say migrate, and then just run the server again. We can come here into the admin and import those models. So let's just do that on the next line. So we'll just do it like this. So variation and item variation. And then we'll add new classes here. So what we can do is we can actually use an inline model admin for the item variation. So what we can do is actually start with just a basic item variation admin. So we can just say this is a model admin. We'll say the list display, and that's going to be a list of items, which if we're dealing with the item variation, which is this model here, we can display the variation, value, and attachment just like this, and then just wrap them in quotes like that. Okay. Then we can specify the list filter, and then this we can filter by variation, and we could also filter by the variation, which takes us here, and then filter by that item as well. So we can add variation double underscore item, and then lastly we can add search fields, and we most likely would want to search by value. Then we can go and create an inline, tabular inline model admin for the same model. So we can say class item variation inline admin. That's going to be admin dot tabular inline. Then we specify the model, which is going to be the item variation. And then I'll just say extra equals 1. So we only have one extra row in the form sets. We can actually take the item variation admin and we can link that to over here. So we can say admin. We can actually just copy this one here, and we'll link the item variation with the item variation admin. And then we can go and create the variation admin. So variation admin, which is just going to be a model admin. We can specify the list display, and these fields on the variation is going to be the item and the item name or name. So we'll specify them here. Cool. Then we can specify list filter, and this is just going to be the item that we'll want to filter by. Then we can add search fields, and this is just going to be name that we'll want to search by. Then we can add inlines, and this is just a list of inline admins, which is going to be the item variation inline admin. Then we can go and say we'll register the variation, and we're going to register that using the variation admin. Cool. So if we check that's all working, and if we come here into the admin and just refresh this, then here we have item variations, and they are the variations. So if we go to variations and click add variation, then here we have the item that we can select. So I'll just select the shirt. We could say that the variation is the color, and then the value we could say is red. We could add blue, and we could add green. Then I'll go and add some images for this, and then we can just save that. Cool. So now we have the color variation for the shirt. And what I'm actually going to do is go and create another item, and we'll just call this pants. Cool, so now we have pants. So if we come back here to products, we have shirt and pants. We can click there. And now what we want to do is get all of the information for all those variations that link up to this specific item. So if we come back here, we can close the admin and we can close the models there. Then here where we serialize our item detail view, we're most likely going to want to use a different serializer that gives us more information. So we can come here into the serializers, and I'm just going to scroll up here to the item serializer, and we can just copy all of that and then come down here, and I'm going to call this the item detail serializer. Now all of this is going to remain the same, except now we want to get all of the variations that are linked to this item. So that way we can do it with a serializer method field, and we can just add another method here, and this is going to be called get variations. Then what we want to do is create a serializer that will serialize the variation model and give us that information. Otherwise we're just going to get the actual variation primary keys, and that's not exactly helpful. So here we can just say class variation serializer, which is going to be a model serializer as well. We can just go and specify class meta there again, and the model is going to be the variation, and we need to import that. So just variation and item variation. Then we'll come down here. So the model here is the variation. The fields, we can get rid of all of those, are going to be the ID, the item, and the name. So I'll specify them here. We actually won't even need the item, because the item is just linking back to what's creating that data in the first place, since we're going to get the data in this method. So we don't actually need to pass in the item in this, we just need the name. But because the variations are also linked to all these item variations, or rather the other way around, then we want to get all of the item variations that link up to that specific variation. So we can do that with the serializer method as well. So we'll just specify that here, and this we're going to call the item variations, and we can grab this here. We're going to create a method here which is get item variations, and then we'll specify that name in here, and we should also specify variations in here. So then here we're going to use the item variation serializer. So I'm actually just going to copy all of that, paste this here, and we'll call this one the item variation serializer. We won't need to fetch any further data. This is where it ends, and we just need to specify item variation as the model, and we can get rid of that. And if we check here on the item variation, we'll want to pass in the value and the attachment. So we can just bring those two in here. Okay, so there's those fields, value and attachment. Then here in the actual method where we're serializing the data, we're going to grab all of the item variation objects that link up to the variation. So that's going to be item variation underscore set dot all. That's going to be all of the item variations that link up to this specific variation. Then we can just use the serializer to serialize all of that, and we'll say many equals true. Then I'm going to copy that, and we can come down here, and instead of it being item variation, it's going to be variation now. And now we want to get all of the variations, so the variation set dot all, and that will give us all of the variations that are linked up to the item. So now we need to bring this item detail serializer in here. So let's just paste that there, use that as the serializer. Okay, let's come back, refresh this, and okay, let's see the error here. It says list serializer is not JSON, and that's because we need to call .data on the end of that. So there and there. Okay. Cool. So we can come back, refresh this, Okay, so now if we go to /1, now we have variations, which give an ID and the name of the variation, which is color. We get the item variations that link up to this color, and that's red and blue and green. And we have the attachment, which is a link to the media file for this variation. So now we can just go and use something like a list to go and loop through all of those, or rather an item. So something like this. So we'll just copy that. We can copy that item group and come back here, and we can close off these. And then inside this grid column, we can go and paste all of that. And let's just see what this looks like. Cool. So then we can go and get rid of these extra two here, because we're going to be looping through the data. So inside here, we can say data.variations, and then we're going to take that item group and we'll say data.variations.map each variation and return an item group, and we'll say the key is going to be v.id. Cool, so we only have content A right now, and we can go in inside the item group, because now we're going to loop through all of the item variations for this variation. So inside here, we're going to say v.itemVariations.map each item variation, and we're going to return an item, and we're going to specify the key as iv.id. So if we come back now we have all of those variations, and then we can just go and grab, instead of content A, this is going to be iv.value, and instead of that source, it's going to be iv.attachment, and we're actually just going to output this dynamically so that we can just add in front of it HTTP 127 localhost. So we can come back here, and there we go. Now we have those variations showing up, and we can just come above the item group, and I'm just going to add a React fragment just like this. And then in here we can add a header. So I'll just come up here to the top, and we'll just add header. Come back down here, and then we can add a header here, and we'll say this is try different variations, and I'll say as h2. Then here inside the second return statement here, we can add another React fragment so that we can add another header. So just like this, and copy that one and paste it here, and we'll say this is h3, and this is going to be the name of the variation. So that's going to be v.name. So if we come back, cool. We can actually take this and put that where this is, and we can actually put this here. Yeah, so then we can get rid of the fragment there actually. Okay, so just clean that up a little bit. And okay, cool. So now we have the color variation showing up, and we could actually just come back here, and let's just go to variations, and we could go and create another one and say that this is for shirt. Let's say it's called size, and we can have small, and let's see, this field is required. What I'm actually going to do is come here to that model, and I'm going to say null equals true, and actually not null, this is going to be blank. So we can actually just come here and make migrations, and just ignore there, and then migrate, run the server, and we should be able to refresh this. Okay, so now for size, let's just come back here. We can have small and medium. If we come back here and refresh this, now we don't have any pictures for that, but we could actually just come in here, and we can say if there is an attachment, then we'll render out the image. So we'll say if this, then do all of that. So if we come back, cool. So that doesn't look too bad. Now we have our product detail view looking a little bit better, and we've introduced the concept of variations. And then in the next one, we can start taking a look at how we can add these different variations in our cart. So when we're adding an item to the cart, how do we specify different variations? And we'll take a look at that in the next one. So if you enjoyed this video, leave a comment down below, let us know what you thought. And otherwise, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.